Welcome to the Nomiki Show. I'm Nomiki Konst. This is a special interview really about breaking news out of Greece. For those who are unaware, there was a group, a far-right Nazi-aligned group called the Golden Dawn, which has been around for a few decades, that stood trial with the EU, and they were convicted this week. This is a major, major, major story. And, you know, there's a lot of news out there right now, but I wanted to make sure folks knew what was going on and what the backstory is of the Golden Dawn. And I'm just really excited to have the editor and co-founder of Athens Live, that is a publication in Athens, Greece, Tassos Morfis. Thank you so much for joining us with the time difference, but it's not that late in Greece because you guys have dinner at like 11 o'clock at night, so.
We just had dinner.
You just had dinner.
It's 9 p.m. Yeah. Thanks a lot for having me.
So, Tasso, I mean, a lot of folks in the U.S., unfortunately, this doesn't get a lot of coverage in the U.S. Corporate media, of course, doesn't delve into these stories as much, or maybe it's a small piece of information in the New York Times, little story. But the Golden Dawn really blew up on an international level when there was this murder of a famous activist rapper at the port of Piraeus, which is south of Athens. Could you tell us like what happened and how this trial really took form?
So, Golden Dawn is a political party. It had the form of a political party. It became a political party in the 80s. It was a tiny group of hardcore neo-Nazis. You know, these macho types with shaved heads and the pilot jackets and the camel pants, walking around with the white laces. So yeah, there were a bunch of them back in the 80s. They still used back then to attack brutally activists, mostly left-wing activists and anarchists. Back then, Greece didn't have any immigrants. So
any immigrants meaning there wasn't. It was Greek. Just for clarity there. In terms of immigrants, there was no inflow of like refugees.
Exactly. I mean, Greece received the first migrants in the late 80s when the first Filipinos came because of shipping, and they brought their families, and then it started receiving more and more people from other countries. But in the 80s, there were only Greeks. So they used to attack the political opponents as they saw it. And basically, they were working hand in hand with the cops. So whatever the cops couldn't do, they were attacked. And at some point, this how can I put, this virus developed, and over the years, when the crisis hits, they kind of re-emerged in the political scene.
The economic crisis in Greece.
The economic crisis in 2010, just a couple of years after the housing crisis hit in the U.S. And all of a sudden, they presented themselves as patriots who would like to make Greece like a stronger country in the Balkans, and they would rearrange stuff in a way that Greeks would benefit first. And you know, the political system is rotten, and that they're true nationalists and patriots, and that they would make things better. And because of the devastating crisis, we had about 500,000 people that voted for them. Yeah.
And what is that when you say 500,000 people voted for the Golden Dawn Party? This was how soon after the crisis, and just in terms of percentage of the vote, what does that make up?
So this is about 5% of the electoral body, which is enough to put you in the parliament. You need 3.5 to go in the parliament, and they get 5%. And they emerged from their caves in 2010, but they were elected in the elections of 2012. In the meantime, from 2010 to 2012, they were treated by the media in a way that it's stunning. Journalists that would have them on their TV shows in the 90s as activists, and of course knew what Golden Dawn was about. They again invited them to their shows, and they presented them as honorable people, that honorable men that love their country and they want to do something great for the country. While in fact, in the morning shows, they were presenting themselves with a tie and a suit and very well behaved. Well, exactly, not very well behaved, because at some point they were slapping journalists and female MPs on air. Yes, this has happened.
Slapping? Like physically slapping them?
Yeah. Elias Kasidiaris, who was the vice president of Golden Dawn, he slapped on air Liana Kanelli, a communist MP. Yeah. And it was insane because I mean, you wouldn't even do this on like, no one would ever think of doing this in real life. What about on television, on live television, in the morning show when everyone's watching you, you know? Like, you would never ever think of like,
oh my God,
watching this on air, but in fact, it happened. So, yeah, the media actually kind of brew this thing and planted the seed for Golden Dawn to collect all these votes. And in fact, when they entered the parliament, when they got the far right corner of the parliament, that was when we saw the real face. And they got money, they got public funds for their offices and their campaigns, because every political party gets taxpayer money in order to be okay with their financials. And so that was when they got real power. And also, it wasn't the money that they got. It was the ability to move into the cover of darkness with an excuse that now they are a parliamentary. They have a parliamentary team, and so they're able to do anything they want. There was a case in the University of Athens, at the Polytechnic of Athens, where they were beating some people, and the car that was used was the official car that an MP was using to go to the parliament and back and forth his house. And there was a professor from the university that she saw the incident from the window of her office, and she told the cops that, you know, I saw this and that, and they were threatening her. You know, they were calling her and threatening her. And that was the kind of thing that was happening. So in 2000, they were blatantly using resources that were paid with taxpayer money to attack migrants, to attack activists, and to attack generally anyone they didn't like. And there was this day, it was September, it was the 13th of September, 2013. I can still remember the night that the murder of Pavlos Fyssas happened, because, you know, it was one of the days that I went to bed really early. I was very, very tired, and around midnight I received a text message from a friend saying that, you know, Golden Dawn stabbed one of us, and I didn't really understand what was going on. In the morning, we found out what really happened. The media back then said, some of the media said that, you know, Pavlos Fyssas was killed because he was a football hooligan, a soccer fan, and that was a brawl between soccer fans.
So they tried to distort it. They started to distort it like it was some sort of football fight.
Yeah, that was like, I mean, that was in the news, and that was when actually everything happened, and that got really big publicity, because Pavlos Fyssas was Greek, and he was very well known in the anti-fascist movement. He was a worker in the shipyards, so really working class. He was an anti-fascist. He was a declared anti-fascist because he was part of his neighborhoods and his area anti-fascist committees and anti-fascist teams. And also, he was an artist. He was an anti-fascist artist. He was a rapper, and he was always talking against fear. And with his lyrics, he was always trying to convince people to go out and demand what they're worth. And generally, you know, his work was always resembling his roots, meaning working class and liberty, and etc. So that was when things got over the top, and the government back then, it was a New Democracy government with Andoni Samaras.
Who's New Democracy is?
So New Democracy is So New Democracy is a center right, now I would say a far right
Because they're in power now.
party
Right.
that is again in power since July 2019. They were formed after the junta and after the dictatorship, 1967, 1973. And they used to be center right. But the thing is that they were always connected to the far right and to what we call the conservatives in Greece. So,
and it's led by, I mean, we'll get to this in a second, but
yeah.
This is a New Democracy, whatever, I'm speaking Greek online. It's led by the former prime minister of Greece, like the son of the former, just like George W. Bush, for instance, just to put it into American terms. So, you know, George Bush was seen to be more center-right. CIA, obviously, you know, the head of the CIA, very centrist, like what classic conservatism was. But now it's out the window with Trump, but when George W. Bush was elected, he was perceived to be far more right-wing than his father because of the times. And of course, there's many reasons we could articulate that now today, even without an Ellen interview. And I don't know if you know about that, but Ellen is a show in the United States where she thinks he's a great guy now. But it's a very similar situation in which this bland son of a former prime minister is now in power, and because of the circumstances of the electorate, the party has moved more right-wing. Is that fair enough to say?
Definitely. I would say that New Democracy right now is a perfect example of nepotism as we know it from the textbooks, from the academic textbooks. Nepotism derives from the word nephew. And actually, Greece is the only country in the European Union that we're very proud of our democracy, is the only country that's run by a family. I mean, Greek businesses, especially in the US, they were family owned and family run. But having a whole country run by a family, no way. Indeed, this is happening. The prime minister is the son of a former prime minister, and his nephew is the mayor of Athens. His wife is one of the most major anchor women that covered the elections, of course.
They own a channel too, right? They own newspapers in the U.S. They own newspapers in Greece. They own a channel in Greece. It's like if the Murdoch family.
The Mitsotakis family doesn't own any media per se, but they're friends with everyone, with all the publishers. We don't have. That's another very funny thing, if it's not sad and tragic, that we don't have press that's on how do you call it,
public access,
not public, that's opposing the government and not supporting them. It's any counter New Democracy press. I mean, most of the newspapers and most of the TV channels, they're 100% New Democracy, most of the media, I would say 85% of the media, they're pro Mitsotakis, without no doubt. And I'm going back to the family. So the Mitsotakis family was a family that always wanted to get involved in politics, and they were always in part of Greece's politics. Mitsotakis, the father, was a key figure in a movement called Apostasia before the dictatorship, and that actually led to the dictatorship and the colonels taking over for 7 years. It's saddening to see our country being run by this family that wants to have everything for themselves and treats the country as a family-owned pizzeria. And
sounds very familiar. To the Trump family.
It's sad. It's sad. Even though, and here's the problem that's connected to Golden Dawn and the far right. Here's the problem. While Kyriakos Mitsotakis, our prime minister, is as presented, a Harvard-educated VC type of guy, very well-mannered, very funny, very athletic, and he's a reformist. He's a reformist and a reformer in both meanings, with both meanings. He's surrounded by people who have been heavily involved with the far right in their youngest years, who have been having close ties to Golden Dawn, and people that actually have a far right background, the background that Greece doesn't need in order to proceed forward. And let me tell you a very funny moment from today's Golden Dawn trial. I mean, it's the last day of the trial. Hopefully, tomorrow we're going to be knowing how many years each of the mafiosi gets.
But they've been convicted already, though. Just to be clear,
everyone was convicted. That was a massive surprise. We didn't expect it. Personally, I was very disappointed and very pessimistic about the outcome because Greek justice. And we were all very, very happy. I mean, it was probably the happiest day of 2020 on a collective level. There is a member of the European Parliament called Lagos. In English, it translates to rabbit.
It was like rabbit.
Yeah, so he's based in Brussels because he's a member of the European Parliament, and he had to fly back to Greece in order to participate in the trial because he's one of the accused, and he got convicted. And his lawyer today was the father of a member of the Parliament of New Democracy. And he's a very known anti-Semite. He's a very well-known supporter of Nazis. And the thing is that Golden Dawn actually wasn't a far-right neo-Nazi type of thing that was speaking about Greece and was seeing the nationalist aspect of the whole thing. It was a neo-Nazi Hitler-affiliated type of thing. They were with Hitler.
So this is what, okay, so let's go back in history a little bit, because
yes,
this is so confusing to me. Of course, I mean, if you know your history, Nazis occupied Greece. They literally put on the Acropolis, the flag, the Nazi flag was situated when they were occupying Greece. There's plenty of iconic photos. They took over Greek government offices, beautiful offices, and that was, if you're in the center of the city, Nazi headquarters. I mean, this was a full-on occupation in Greece because of geopolitically, it was a very important position for them, and of course they were defeated. It's mind-blowing to me that you could have, given the several occupations Greece has experienced, that you have a movement aligned with actual German Nazis in today's day and age. This is not like, we're not going back in history. Like, your grandparents are alive to tell you, especially the members of this, great-grandparents, grandparents, to tell you their experience. It's visual. It's not like you're in the United States and it's this past, like my generation. It is right in front of your face. How on earth was this able to happen? Where are the origins of this?
So today is a very significant day because 76 years ago, the Nazis were kicked out of Athens. And exactly 76 years ago today, the Athenians took to the streets in order to celebrate the first day of liberation. And they welcomed the partisans, and they welcomed the British, and they welcomed the US forces. I mean, there were no US forces back then, but the British and the Allies in general. So karma is a bitch sometimes. And what we need to understand is that Greece was liberated from the Nazis because there was a national liberation front that was formed. And that liberation front was founded by the communists. So basically, the communists liberated Greece. But as soon as the communists were taking over and they were liberating part and part of Greece, the Allies didn't really like that. So they brought back the government that was exiled in Cairo. They brought them back, they restored them, and with a massive wave of terrorism against the left, they tried to
why
convince.
did the Allies want the communists out?
Because back then the Allies, they were very into dividing Southern Europe and Southeastern Europe, and they could see that Greece had a vital geostrategic role in the area. So it was always like the holy grail of geopolitics, yep. And they were fighting over it. So the Allies, they didn't want Greece to fall into the Soviet hands. They wanted a big part of it. They couldn't share it. For some reason, Stalin wasn't really interested, and they decided to take over. Because also, Greece is the only European EU territory nowadays that is close to the east and to Turkey, and it has a very significant role in geopolitics. So the Allies were very, very interested in that, and they decided to hit hard the communists. So they launched a massive wave of white terror, and the Communist Party also did a couple of mistakes. But we can, after all these years, we can see people, fighting for 4 years trying to kick the Nazis out of the country, and they couldn't fight more. So they were dragged into a second war, into a civil war, and they were basically pushed out of the country to the Balkans from the U.S. Army and the Greek National Army. And there was, and in the 50s, after the Civil War ended in 49, and in the 50s, there was a very conservative climate in Greece, meaning that poverty combined with conservatism created this very weird mixture of how can I put it? Create this very weird mixture that kept Greece off the radar of development. So while other European nations progressed, we were left out of this. And later on,
a depression, a major depression.
Major depression, yes. Later on, NATO, because NATO was extremely scared of a Soviet invasion, they started this program called the Gladio program, which was a program that was supported by secret services, by military secret services around NATO countries, where they're organizing paramilitary groups to react in order of Soviet invasion. And they did the same in Greece, and they mostly used ex-military officers, active military officers, policemen, and generally agents. The theory says that Golden Dawn was part of this Gladio program, or at least some of its founding members. They were part of the Gladio program, because Golden Dawn started as a tiny underground far-right bombing group. They have bombed cinemas and where people were watching progressive movies, and they had access to guns and weaponry and explosives. So Golden Dawn is.
How did they get access to all this?
Probably they had access because they were talking to the military, and they were talking to NATO officials, and they could have their hands on such things. Gladio program, in Norway, Gladio program had thousands of hidden places full with ammunition, radio communication devices, food, water. Because Norway was really close to the Soviet Union, and they were the first primary target for a soil for a land invasion. Anyway, exactly because Greece suffered after the 50s and the 60s, after this massive depression. Greece suffered a 7-year long dictatorship by the colonels, that they also sold Cyprus to the Turks. And this is widely known because CIA documents have been declassified, and we can have our hands on them, and we can study them, and we can see how the colonels actually collaborated with CIA, and they gave half of Cyprus to the Turks, and there was a massive bloodbath back then. So all these events created a climate for such an organization to flourish in Athens. And don't forget that after all these events and all these almost three decades full of depression, financial and political depression, there was a rebirth of movements with the socialist party, PASOK. Yeah. There was a resurgence of far left terrorism with 17th of November. It's a notorious guerrilla organization, and they assassinated, it's like the Greek Baader-Meinhof, RAF, and they assassinated mostly cops, military personnel, CIA officials, politicians.
And what year was this?
It was from 1976 to 2004 that they were dismantled. So after the dictatorship fell, we entered this era called Metapolitevsi, which is basically the rebirth of left-wing politics, is the socialism, is the third way. Yep. The notorious third way that's coming back, and it is driving the agenda. Yeah. And the system back then wanted a paramilitary group to work as a long hand of the police in order to terrorize all the activists and to terrorize all the people that were taking into the streets. So Golden Dawn started as this formation of underground bombers and underground thugs that were stabbing people. They were appearing with hammers and axes, and they were attacking occupations, and they were attacking anarchists who were rioting. They were basically trying to do all the dirty work for the cops.
Right.
And while this was inactive for almost 2 decades, the financial crisis of 2010 brought this thing back. And as we sometimes call them, the vampires got alive again, and they took over. So
preying on, running on nationalism, and initially nationalism, and pointing at especially like the refugees more recently in the last decade as the problem. It was Albanians 20 years ago coming in, and then now it's the refugees coming in from Syria and Africa. The financial...
Sorry, now that you said Albanians, that's one example. One of the massive pogroms took place the night against Albanians, took place the night Greece won it was the European Championship in 2004 in Portugal. So while all Greeks and foreign workers have gathered in Omonia Square, which is like a very central square in Athens, Golden Dawn had tried to find a way and infiltrate the party. And later they launched this massive pogrom against Albanian workers. I don't remember how many were stabbed to death, but it was the first night that we could see this pogrom taking place. And 2004.
Jesus. So, now you had the economic crisis of 2010, the last decade, of course, the refugee crisis. where Greek is on the front lines, and that's a whole other conversation for another time in terms of the amount of funding that Greece receives and support, and how the rest of the EU is blocking migration. So, without the resources and the refugees, it's creating this climate of hostility and animosity from folks who are feeling insecure and prideful, have nationalism, and are looking to the other. And so it's a very, this is the tale as old as time. The same thing Donald Trump ran on. The Mexicans are taking your jobs. The refugees are taking your money, your resources, whatever it is. Just touching on the economic crisis, because the international audience, I think, I often get a headache when talking about this, because, especially on the left, because it's a very different conversation than when you're in Greece having a conversation on the left over what happened in terms of Yanis Varoufakis and, quitting and the frustration with Syriza. Can you just briefly touch on how that crisis and how Syriza dealt with the government, dealt with economic crisis and negotiations in relation to this nationalism that brewed as a result? Does that make sense as a question?
Yeah, you want to explore the relationship between Syriza and Golden Dawn, right?
Well, specifically, like the
during
response.
administration.
Yeah, when Syriza, which was a coalition of the left, they brought in communist parties to win this coalition, to fight off the center right and obviously the far right. But as a result, the failures in the negotiation led to more nationalism and, of course, even on the left, anger against Syriza. So there was a split, which creates an opening for Neo-Demokratia and like the far right to point fingers at the left. See, like, you couldn't handle this, and more nationalism is spread, far right nationalism. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. So the first thing we need to mention is that when Syriza took over, Golden Dawn was already under prosecution. The persecution started in 2013, right after the Pavlos Fyssas murder. So the Golden Dawn trial was already developing while Syriza took office. But if Syriza wanted to react against Golden Dawn, they could have done many more things. And what they could have done is that they could have taken people to the streets, and they could have actively fought fascism in a way, meaning education, meaning funding independent media, meaning blocking their way into parliamentary committees. You can find also when you're government, of course, you can find all sorts of ways to battle your opponents. And when your opponents are Nazis, I think that you need to be ruthless against them. And this is why now that New Democracy, that the Golden Dawn is going to jail under New Democracy claims the victory for themselves. So it's very interesting to realize how Syriza could have done more, but on the other hand, they kind of ignored the whole thing, and they didn't create a base for people today to react negatively in this narrative coming from the government and the media that they put them into jail.
How much of that is a result of just being preoccupied by the economic crisis and Germany's stranglehold over their ability to? I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here, politically.
Yeah, I'm going to give you an example. Syriza had engulfed parts of the nationalist left that were depicting Merkel as a Nazi, which is, of course, something that is totally unacceptable. So yeah, there was populism. I don't think Syriza was a populist or is a populist political party, but they kind of ignored the threat, and they kind of ignored how bad this can be how bad this can backfire to them, because now New Democracy is pointing at Syriza as the other extreme, you know. So it kind of blew up in their face. But what's most important is to see what the Communist Party is doing, because the Communist Party actually had people who were one of the Communist Party Unionists was one of the three major cases in the Golden Dawn trial. And the Communist Party has taken it to the streets many times, and they have organized self-defense units, and they have organized self-defense teams, and they have been actually fighting the fascists, the Nazis in the streets. And this is exactly the point I want to stand to. Syriza didn't really took a major blow to Golden Dawn, because they didn't organize and they didn't give space to anti-fascist organizations, meaning helping them with resources or funding them or trying to support them in any sort of way.
And how much of that is also because they didn't want to fuel the fire, you know?
Probably. But also Syriza didn't actually investigate against them. So my main question is, Syriza had the Ministry of Public Order and Citizen Protection for 4 years. We know for a fact that the police force is around 40% voting for Golden Dawn. That's a tremendous number. It means that almost 2 out of 5 cops are voting for Golden Dawn. So,
which is a very small party, by the way. This is like
yeah.
This is like half the cops are voting for.
The Constitution obliges
4% of the pop. Yeah.
Yeah, the Greek Constitution obliges that the army, that armed forces, including the police, they vote on their stations, where they're headquartered, where they're stationed. So the public knows what our guardians believe, estimately believe. Yeah, I mean, we had this discussion earlier with some friends. You know, you had two Syriza ministers that never actually investigated who is funding Golden Dawn, because that's the problem, and this is going to shake the political foundation of Greece, because ship owners have been funding Golden Dawn, because oligarchs have been funding Golden Dawn, and I
think it'll also affect the diaspora too. I mean, for folks who don't know, the diaspora is extremely conservative, partly because of the wave. I mean, it's complicated, but there's the waves of immigration, and when my grandparents came over, who were Democrats and left-leaning, they came over after World War II. They didn't have any money. But more recent waves, it's tied to how much money and can you be sponsored. So you have a more oligarch-centered, and the media is oligarch-owned. So the diaspora, even if they came over in the wave in the 40s and 50s, the generations are consuming Greek media that is very, very much aligned with this conservative right ideology, and it does not reflect what's on the ground in Greece whatsoever. And that's the big mind, when people's minds get blown. It's I'm very curious to see.
This is why Syriza lost in the last elections, because they didn't manage to deliver. They didn't manage to deliver literally anything. And of course, it was an experiment with the left being in power in one of the most critical times in Greek history after the Second World War. So basically, the left and Alexis Tsipras, they took Greece out of the swamp with massive sacrificing the public opinion after the referendum. So it took the referendum, and the result of the referendum, the way Tsipras handled the referendum, took a huge toll on its image, and a huge toll on the left. But when it comes to Golden Dawn, they didn't manage to do anything to prevent what we are witnessing today. And despite the good news, that's a fun thing. Despite the good news, despite that Golden Dawn is going to jail, and they're officially, it's historically written in the text. It's going to be written in textbooks that this was a political party that was also a mafia. That was a mafia organization. History is also going to write that they were put in jail by New Democracy.
Right, exactly.
And this is, I would say that this is a very postmodern oxymoron. This is a very neoliberal oxymoron right now. But I'd be personally very happy if I could see the left pushing forward for such reforms in the criminal cases, and so the result could be much better.
Is there something that can happen on the EU level in terms of investigating their finances? I mean, do you see anything like that happening?
Definitely, there is a way, but what's the worst part is that under Syriza, there was a penal code that was changed. So if the penal code, so Syriza did some reforms in justice. They had an agenda in justice that they wanted to push forward, and some things worked, some things didn't work. So the penal code that was changed under Syriza could have taken a different blow on Golden Dawn rather than the one we have today, which again is great, it's fantastic, but we could have seen way more when it comes to who's been financing them, who's been associated. I mean, yes, I know that almost 65 people are indicted, and it's incredible how this massive trial got to an end. But the roots of fascism and Nazism, they're very well planted in Greek society, and they have to do with the elites oppressing the working class. And yeah, we need to see who's financing those guys. We need to find out who's financing these people, because if you find out who's financing them, it's going to be a major shakedown to
globally
to the Greek political system.
And globally, I mean, no doubt. I mean, geopolitically,
Absolutely.
to know
Absolutely.
what it means to, especially in a time of crisis, what it means to challenge a working class movement. Before we wrap up, in terms of Syriza, like Alexis Tsipras is still in office. He's still very popular too. I mean, I know he was voted out, but in certain parts of Greece, he attracts 30,000 people crowds. It's like the U.S. politics, right? It's a concentration of, everything's very targeted. So if he goes to Crete, he's very popular. Maybe not so much in other parts of Greece.
Yeah.
I mean, is he still the de facto leader? Is there still an opportunity for the left to take power back when there's an eventual election?
This is a great question. I want to go back to Second World War for a second. So as we said earlier, today, the 12th of October, marks the liberation of Athens. And what's very weird in Greece is that we don't actually celebrate this day. I mean, it's an average Monday. It's a very boring autumn Monday, and we don't have a celebration or we don't have a parade. So Greece is the only country in the EU that doesn't celebrate our victory against the Nazis. And we only celebrate when we said no to the Italians. The 28th of October, Italy said, we want to invade your country. We said no. We fought until the Nazis came and they took over, and then we lost. But then we kicked them out again in 1944, and we don't celebrate this. And the reason why we don't celebrate this is because Greece was never actually, Greek justice never really investigated who collaborated with the Germans and the Nazis, so they could never ever again find a place in the Greek public sphere. Collaborators of Nazis took several official positions. Collaborators of Nazis made a fortune during Second World War and the Civil War. Collaborators of Nazis are still running things, and their families are still running things in Athens. Ship owners were some of the most notorious collaborators with Nazis. So there is a tremendously well cemented political system around the Nazis, the Second World War Nazis, that it has roots, that it has its ramifications up to today. And a left-wing government was not able to battle that. It will need a lot of years and a lot of political work on the ground in order to change this. So while Syriza could have delivered more, could definitely have delivered more, and would have been way more popular in the Greek public opinion, they have to battle this insane system of conservatives and I would blatantly say fascists that own the press, and they own the main major industries, and they are very deeply rooted in the deep state, as we call it. And this is the reason why I don't think they're going to have another chance, because they got a chance and they're definitely going to get a second one. But even if they get it, I don't think they're going to stay in power for much long. And the thing is that the second thing is that Syriza is a multi-tendency party, which means that a multi-tendency party, which means that the Syriza is formed from little different fractions that form a solid political party. But now that they're in the opposition, they're not that solid. We can see that they have a lot of turmoil in their conferences and in their committees. One is for sure that so they don't give the image of a solid political formation that people can trust. Greeks say that you guys are fighting with each other about like something very stupid, such as like a name or a star or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, how can we trust you? The thing is that one thing is for sure that Mitsotaki's government it's failing big time.
Yeah.
COVID has accelerated this procedure, and we're definitely gonna see another electoral round in the next couple of years, even 2021, where I don't think Syriza will be prepared to battle New Democracy.
So last question, but there is a generational difference. I mean, this is as globally, right? The younger folks under 40 who've dealt with austerity at a global level, economic downturn, are of course more left-leaning. I mean, doesn't mean that there aren't Golden Dawn members that are younger, right? But they're not aligning with New Democracy, in another way of saying it. You know, New Democracy didn't win with young people, won with older people. So at least Syriza has that, no? Like, is there not some sort of progress that could come out of just a sweeping generational wave, including refugees, including, you know, folks who have been personally affected by the tendencies of the far right?
If you attend any organizational meetings of Syriza, or if you see any photos from their party activities, you're only going to see old people in the room, which is pretty.
I went to some things; they weren't all old people. The Secretary of Labor was a young woman. I mean, there's some stuff there.
They definitely represent progress, and they definitely represent a large fraction of the people that don't want to see conservatism taking over for one more time. They definitely represent a new generation that has been wanting change, imminent change, and rapid change. But their organizational structure is very, very problematic. So they need to open up a wider, more progressive alliance, and this is, I think, the way they're heading to, in order to engulf all these people that they just don't want to see the right wing taking over anymore. Right. You know, they're very bored with this. But when it comes to younger generations, I don't think we're going to be speaking of the left. I think we're going to be speaking of a more progressive alliance, which is again saddening because the left has a very, very big history in Greece, and our grandfathers were part of the left, and the thought, and we shouldn't forget. But Syriza is a very important case study for like global politics, and I wish that they could try to find very groundbreaking ways to get their message across.
Mm-hmm.
Because I can see them trapped in like the same thing over and over again. And I'm saying things that I wish. I'm saying that I wish, for Syriza to find something more innovative to do politically, because the whole thing is the whole thing in Greece is becoming so suffocatingly boring.
Yeah.
And there needs to be another alternative. Yannis Varoufakis is also very well organized, and
he has global support.
He's collecting more and more people on his side, and he's doing this thing with the pan-European platform of his. So yeah, we need something that's not boring. We need to see something that's not boring, and I really wish that more people get up and try to do their thing, because there is space. There's definitely space. We have learned a lot from the last 10 years, and I think also Syriza needs to see other people getting up and challenging their narrative, so they become a little bit more competitive.
And just to put this in context, because it's not the case in the United States. While Syriza is a little fragmented and it needs to be revived, and some of this has to do with in the U.S. we spend all of our money all year long building elections and systems. It doesn't work that way in most countries in the EU. They have shorter election spans, so you don't have this long-term investment. But alternatively, the communists are even older. So just keep that in mind too, that, if it's going to come, it has to really be a new place. The KKE is not the most vibrant group.
Yeah. No, the thing with the KKE is that even though they have quite an appeal to younger people and to younger voters, they are made out of this very conservative DNA that doesn't actually look to the future but looks to the past. And I believe that now is the time that we see the whole thing in a more progressive context. I mean, we should see things in different way, because we definitely need to look at theory and see what theory has been teaching us, and you never forget history and everything. But now globalization is speeding things up. Like, we have technology, and we need to, if we can organize a pan-European movement in literally one day. You can remember what happened with the Indignados in Spain. A few hours later, people were in the streets in Athens. So,
George Floyd, of course, we saw this internationally.
Exactly. There is a massive banner next to the court case, to the court in Athens. There is a massive George Floyd banner. I was watching on this, and I had the chills, and so we should think on a more global level. And what's very, very important is that we should look at little victories we can achieve every fucking day. Mm-hmm. Because if we don't, pardon my French, but this is very, very important, we should always find those little gaps and try to fit in victories when it comes to unions, when it comes to little things as defending students that are occupying a school, helping refugees, trying to explain to our friends what's happening with politics. We should always go after these tiny victories, because these tiny victories, they create fertile ground for something larger to happen. And this is the thing. Here's the thing with the Golden Dawn case. This this battle started in 2008 when there was a revolt, an anti-police revolt in Athens after the shooting of a 16-year-old in Exarchia. Golden Dawn was together with the cops, and they were attacking anarchists.
Yeah.
So there were people on the ground that were actively fighting fascism in militias, and they were actively carrying self-protection equipment with them in order to fight, literally fight the Nazis that were carrying handguns and knives and pocket knives. So this is a struggle. This is like a decade-long struggle that ended last week and ended victoriously. It's something like, can you simply imagine what would have happened if the court said, these people are a mafia organization. They are legitimate, some of them might be criminals, but they're a legitimate political party. A 10-year-long struggle for people that have been stabbed, that have been arrested, that have been tortured by the cops, would have been long gone. So we need this fresh breath of victorious air in order to keep it going. We need to focus on these little struggles. And this is where I disagree with the KKE. They won't establish socialism the next day right through, but we can't really do that. And we need all these small victories in order to proceed. And also, it's the lean way of revolution, It's the lean way of moving forward.
Alternatively, if they didn't do it, if they didn't convict them, my guess is there would probably be an election pretty soon, because people would be revolting on the streets, anger, and there would be international intervention. So on one hand, it's a great win. Sorry to be a pessimist. On the other hand, I don't think Mitsotakis had a choice. There had to be, and not that it was up to him, but there had to be something. It's gone too far. It's like the Republicans who are leaving Trumpism because it's too far. It crosses whatever line should be perceived, even though behind the scenes they're all holding hands.
I mean, now everyone knows officially that the Golden Dawn belongs to the past and it's a criminal organization. Personally, I don't really mind conservative people belonging to a victorious movement against the grandsons of Hitler. I think left and generally the progressive alliance should engulf all these people that are thinking about it and they're not fully convinced. Because if someone aims to do revolution, I think we need to convince all these people that are on the other side. And what's the best way to convince them than getting justice to function? I mean, to be honest with you, it was the largest anti-fascist meeting, demonstration that has ever been in Athens since forever. There were about 70,000 people in the streets, like during a pandemic. Don't forget that. Yeah. And the cops, they brutalized the whole thing 42 seconds after the decision was announced.
Wow.
So now we have to battle the real Golden Dawn, which is Greek police. And good luck with that. Yeah.
Tasso, thank you for joining us. This was such an interesting conversation, and as things progress, I would love to have you on. Of course, I care about Greece, and I lived there for a bit, so it's important for me to keep up just on a personal level with the politics, but also I think geopolitically, and historically, it's an important country to look to because the history never really went away. If you want to really study revolutions and the left, I mean, every few years, as you've just outlined in a very, in a quick way, the last, 60, 70, 80 years of transformation between oligarchs and fascists and anti-fascists and communists. I mean, this is the country to look to. So I appreciate it. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks a lot for having me.
And Athens Live, people can find Athens Live. How do we find you?
You go on athenslive.org or .gr, and you should subscribe to our newsletter. It comes out every Saturday, and it's a weekly roundup of what's happening. You can also support us on Steady, and stay tuned. Thanks a lot.
And it's in English.
Yeah, it's in English.
Important for me.
Absolutely.
All right. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching and listening to The Nomiki Show. But remember to click like and subscribe on YouTube, and please share on social media. If you're not already a patron, please join us for as low as $5 a month on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show for early and special content. That investment makes a huge difference. We are not corporate media raking in the dough. It's really you guys that are keeping us going. So please consider being a patron. And to our current patrons, thank you so much. We are incredibly grateful to you. We also now have swag. So check us out on thenomikishow.com to get your mugs, your totes, and your stickers.